Are you winning? Do you need help in your life or business? Could you use some inspiration, business strategies, and success principles? I'm Daniel Gomez, award-winning business coach, keynote speaker, and best-selling author. On the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show, we will help you create a successful life and elevate your business. Together, we will discover the keys that unlock your success and dreams. Welcome back to another episode of the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show, where we motivate you, we inspire you, and we educate you. And I'll tell you what, today we have a treat. You talk about a special treat. We're talking about a hot fudge sundae with the cherry and whipped cream on top. We got a living legend here today with us, and I'm honored to have him here on the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show. I had a chance to be at his book launch and just spend time with him. He's a true legend in the speaking world. So especially if you want to be an aspiring speaker, you definitely want to get out your pen. You want to get out your paper, because you know what we talk about here in the show. What you write down, you retain over 50% of what you write. And I want you to go back and study your notes, because I know this gentleman, he's a secret until now, is going to drop some massive wisdom. Let's welcome to the Daniel Gomez Inspired Show, Mr. Jim Cathcart. How you doing, my brother?
Thank you, Daniel. Man, it's a treat and a pleasure. Well, actually, it's more than that. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you. And I appreciate that.
Well, I just love your heart. I love your sincerity. And I had a chance to be with you in Austin up there and just really see
That was
you in
nice
action.
of you. Yeah. I mean, you came out to my book signing. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing I've learned, right? You have to support people. You have to give without receiving anything back in expectations. And you're an amazing person. And do me a favor. Can you introduce yourself to the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show?
Certainly. You mean just tell the folks where I come from, what I'm up to?
Just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get going deeper in the show for sure.
I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and grew up there. My dad was a telephone repairman. Mom was a housekeeper, a homemaker. And my grandfather was an invalid in a hospital bed in our front bedroom for 7 years of my childhood. He had a stroke and never moved or spoke again for the last 7 years. And I thought that life was normal. You know, we were living in a suburb. I walked 3 or 4 blocks to school, to grammar school anyway. And we didn't have much money, but we didn't need much money the way we were living. And we fixed things that broke, and we handed down things that weren't used up yet. And we kept the leftovers. You know, we produced very little garbage. In fact, there was an incinerator in our backyard. That was in the days when everybody burned half their trash and sent the rest of it away with the garbage men. So, you know, I grew up with a simple background, not expecting a very big life. And in high school, I graduated 176th out of 430 at Hall High School, Little Rock, Arkansas, 1964. I'll save you the math. I'm 76 years old.
76 years young.
Yeah, well, I am really, because I still do, you know, I still do lots of push-ups. I work out at the gym. I run mountain trails whenever I can, ride my motorcycle, play guitar in nightclubs and private events. And I'm a full-time professional speaker and author. And the book you came to help me release was my 25th book. I've delivered 3,500 paid speeches all around the world, all 50 states, all provinces of Canada except the Yukon, although I've been to Alaska 3 times, Australia, China, 23 major cities. I've received every award that they present to professional speakers. Seriously, I really have. And I've been president of the National Speakers Association. So I've lived a blessed life.
I love that. To me, you're a living legend in the speaking world. And I first heard of you a lot more in 2020 when there was a lockdown in our country. And you spent a lot of time in Clubhouse, and I got to hear a lot of your stories.
Wow. Yeah.
A lot of who really Jim is at the heart, just not as a speaker, but as a human being. And I connected with that. And then the fact that they said, yeah, he used to be the president of the National Speaker Association. So I'm like, man, this is right. And then when it came up recently, about a couple of less than a month ago to come and see you in person. I said, man, I'd be a dummy not to go see him.
Thank you for
So
that.
I was a fan of
Big
yours.
deal.
I was a fan of yours, just hearing you speak in Clubhouse and just really, because my story, I started speaking professionally 5 years ago. Actually, we're going on our 6th year of business already, and my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. But I really just resonated with you because you're a speaker. And first of all, let me ask you this question: what in the heck made you want to be a speaker? And when was your first year that you really went out there and said? Because for me, when my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, my intentions, I left the automotive industry to take care of my wife because she got depressed.
Mhm.
And I was getting dressed one day to just go out for an interview. And God says, nope, I want you to go become a motivational speaker. And I just believed it. I don't know why, Jim. I just believed it in my heart and soul. I told my wife, she didn't tell me then, but she thought I lost it. Really, she thought I lost it because coming, right? She had just had a double mastectomy, 2 major surgeries, and I dropped this bomb that I'm not going to go back to work. I'm going to become this motivational speaker as a profession. And she just said, okay. And but there was others that,
What a blessing for her to be so supportive, because it's a
yes,
really non-traditional choice. You know,
yeah,
I grew up not expecting at all to be a speaker, not expecting to do anything significant. I figured my life would be very ordinary and I would die at the statistical average age for my gene pool and get out of the way for other people. But that's not what happened. And so years later, 1970, I was newly married. We had a baby, and I was working as a clerk for the Urban Renewal Agency in Little Rock, Arkansas, the housing authority.
yes.
And I was an assistant to a man who didn't need help. His name was Bob Moore, and he was bored, and I was his helper. So I'm sitting there, reading books on urban renewal, and I've made it clear to myself that's not my chosen path. And so I'm wondering what to do. And the radio in the next room has a show like this one, although it was shorter. It was a little 5-minute show called Our Changing World by Earl Nightingale, who was
Mm,
on 900 radio stations around the world at the time. He was the big deal, the Oprah Winfrey or the Tony Robbins of the day. And he said, and now this is 1972, and I remember it vividly. He said, if you will spend 1 hour extra every day studying your chosen field, in 5 years or less, you'll be a national expert. Daniel, that blew my mind. I thought, no, wait a minute. The math actually works. An hour a day, let's say 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, 5 years, that's 1,250 hours on one topic. Yeah, you'd be an expert. And the more narrow the topic, the more expert you would be. For example, let's say you're going to be an expert on podcasting. All right. Well, that's a pretty broad category. What about an expert on Christian podcasting? Or what
mm.
about an expert on Christian podcasting for entrepreneurs? Or what about an expert on Christian podcasting for entrepreneurs who are committed to success and are between the ages of X and Y? Then all of a sudden, man, 1,250 hours studying and focusing on that, absolutely, you'd be one of the world's leading authorities. So I thought for weeks, what do I want to be an expert at? I didn't know. And I certainly didn't have any academic skills or high IQ or athletic achievements or rich uncles or people that knew people. I didn't have any of that. And then I thought, you know what? I want to do what the guy on the radio does. Well, I didn't know what the guy on the radio does. I just knew it felt right to me. It's kind of like your moment, be a
Yeah.
motivational speaker. And I thought, I want to do what Earl Nightingale does. I want to help people grow. I had two problems. I had never given a speech and I had nothing to say.
Mm.
That
Sounds
will
like
keep you,
me.
yeah, that'll keep you humble. So I thought, all right, how do I do this? Well, take him at his word and study an hour. In my case, I felt like I was starting from behind the pack. So I needed 2 hours, 3 hours occasionally. So
Yeah.
I became literally textbook, dictionary fanatical
So let me
about
ask you this:
studying.
what is the first subject that you studied? Because I remember.
That's what I'm getting at. Self-development.
Mm.
I learned everything I could from every source I could identify. Now, check these out. Original first edition Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Wow.
Early edition Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. Psycho-Cybernetics. Wallace Wattles, How to Be a Genius and the Science of Getting Rich. Zig Ziglar, See You at the Top. See these two guys?
Yes.
Zig Ziglar and Norman Vincent Peale. Both of them later became my friends.
Wow.
Now, when I
Powerful.
read these books, I was a 20-something-year-old kid, and I had nothing going for me but enthusiasm. But I was fanatical about reading all the books I could get my hands on. And there was no internet, and there was no popularity around the field of self-development or small business success.
Well, let
If
me
you
ask you this. What was the first step you took? Right. You hear Earn Nine go, and I love a lot of his content, right? I still listen to it, a lot of it on YouTube.
Yeah,
What is the first step you took? You hear this radio station, because right now, somebody right now, they're listening to this,
and
and
it's their first day.
they have that boss.
Yeah,
It's not happy. They have that boss right now, Jim, that they're tolerating. And they have a God-given gift inside of them that's been stirring inside of them. But unfortunately, they've been suppressing it. And now they're here listening to the Daniel Gomez Inspire show, listening to a legend like Jim saying, I heard this radio show in 1970. I'm hearing the Daniel Gomez Inspire show with the legend Jim. And maybe it's time for me to take action. Like, what was the first step you took when, after you heard this, what started shifting inside you that led you to become that speaker?
first thing that happened was I went to a guy that I knew named Harold Gash. Harold Gash, and I had had a sales job that I failed at a couple of years earlier, and he came by and gave a speech at one of our sales meetings, and we were selling mutual funds and life insurance. And I struggled through that for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, and failed and left there and went to work selling cars and failed at that and was actually fired. The guy said, Jim, you're a nice guy, but we always fire whoever's last in sales. And this month you're last. So see ya. So I went to work in a friend's grocery store, sacking groceries and stacking boxes, and sent out resumes to every bank in the state of Arkansas and every bank on the edges of Arkansas, in Missouri and Louisiana and so forth. And it was a lame resume, but I wanted to go back to work in a bank, which I had done before. And I thought, if I get really serious about banking, I can move up through the ranks and someday be a successful person. But only 3 banks responded, and 2 of those were thank you, but no thank you. The other one said, come and talk with us. I did, and they didn't hire me. So I ended up taking the housing authority job just because I could make $525 every month.
Woo! You know what? You know why I'm realizing I love you so much? No wonder there's mutual energy. I was a sacker back in the day. I don't even know if you remember this. Back in San Antonio and Austin area, there used to be a grocery store called Kroger. I used to go Krogering. I was one of the top sackers. I won a competition.
There you go.
I was in the automotive industry for almost 20 years. So
You succeeded at it.
I was, and third, now, right, I'm a professional speaker now, going on my 6th year. So no wonder we're in alignment, man.
There you go.
My day.
Yep. I'm 46 years into this full-time speaking. But when I started, I went to this guy, Harold Gash, and I said, you had this recording called The Strangest Secret from Earl Nightingale. I want to know more about that. And he said, well, Jim, here, see up there on my top shelf, all those that look like books? Those are cassette packs. They look like leather, they're vinyl. And this says, how much are you worth? Not financially, but what's your value in the world? And it's an audio cassette with the transcript from Earl Nightingale, from his Lead the Field series. Well, Harold said, Jim, you ought to buy this. And I said, well, how much is it? He said, $560, which today would be like $3,500. And I said, no way. He said, Jim, I've talked with you. I've watched you. you have potential. You have enormous potential. He said, why don't you take all 36 of these tapes, and here's 12 more that go with them. There was a bonus pack of 48 total audio cassettes, 20 minutes long each one. He said, you take them home and for 30 days, listen to them every single day. And at the end of the 30 days, if you don't think this will change your life, you bring it back to me. And if you do, you figure out how to pay for them. And I said, absolutely. I figure I'm getting a free ride. So I bring all these tapes home and my wife says, what's that? And I explain it. And I start listening to these every morning, every time I'm in the car, as often during the day as I can, including during the time I should be talking with her and playing with my son. If I'm cooking hamburgers on the grill, I've got a cassette player there with batteries in it, playing these recordings. And every single time we got in the car, I would turn on the tape player. And Paul would say, let's listen to the radio. Nope, I'm changing my life. And so I did that. And on weekends, I would listen for 5, 6 hours, sometimes 8 hours during the day, and sometimes to the same recording over and over and over.
Yes.
At the end of the 30 days, I was packaging them up to take them back to Harold. And Paula said, you don't want to take them back, do you? And I said, no. She said, why don't you keep them? She had seen enough change in me that she didn't want to go back to the old version of me. Wow. So I figured out how to pay for them. And then I went to work with Harold about 6 months or a year later, selling the Earl Nightingale recordings. I quit my job at the Housing Authority and went to work selling Earl Nightingale's motivational recordings door to door to businesses in Little Rock in 1972 and 3. And in 1984, Earl Nightingale called me and said, I want to record a article of yours that I read. I want you to record it. I said, sir, it already is a recording. He said, well, I publish those. I said, believe me, I know. And he said, send it to me. I sent it to him. And in 1984, Nightingale Conant Corporation published my audio album.
Love it. Love
Relationship
it.
Strategies. I'll show you the actual item.
No worries, no worries. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to think about this. Think about what
wait a
Jim
minute.
is saying.
They sold $8.5 million. No, $3.5 million worth of that album in the year 1984 and 85.
Amen. So
I heard him on the radio. I started selling his recordings. And then 10 years later, he was selling mine around the world.
So what I want you to ask yourself, ladies and gentlemen, is listen to what Jim said. Jim took a chance. Jim bet on himself with these audios. Jim took them with the intention of sending them back. I want you to ask yourself, write down these 3 questions right now. What am I listening to on the daily? What am I listening to on the daily? And ask yourself this, is it adding value to my life? Is it taking me to my future self? Jim wasn't just listening to this. He was, I want you to write this word down, this phrase. He was intentionally listening to these, intentionally listen. While he was cooking, while he was 8 hours, 5 hours on a weekend, a day. How bad do you want to change? You listen to a podcast episode one time and you expect lifelong changes. It doesn't work that way. You need to listen to it 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I teach it this way. You need to listen to it, ladies and gentlemen. Study it like you're going to teach it. And then the second thing is this, is that what I love what Jim said is that he found a way to pay for it. What excuse are you making right now? What excuse are you making right now because you're saying, I can't afford it. I can't buy it. Listen to what Jim said. It was $500 back in the 70s. That was like more like $5,000 or $6,000 of today. But he found a way because he wanted to desperately change his life.
That's it.
You have to want to desperately change your life, ladies and gentlemen. You have to want to change it. It's not going to change by himself. Think about this. A month, he didn't listen to the radio. He listened to it on weekends, every opportunity he had. What are you intentionally listening to? And think about this. Think about this. Are you really, really going to tolerate the rest of your life that you're not happy with? Because Jim just said he had a boss that he wasn't happy there. And then he left. Listen to this. Somebody needs to hear this third part. Write this down. Am I willing to bet on myself? Am I willing to bet on myself? Who are you listening to? Jim is saying, who are you listening to?
Yeah.
He listened to this gentleman. He went to go work for him, and all of a sudden, because he took action in his future direction towards his future self, next thing the very gentleman that he was looking up to, Earl Nightingale, published his audio. He sold millions of copies of his own audio recording. Man, Jim, somebody needed to hear that, because they're listening to the wrong junk, right? On the podcast, on the music, and B, they're not being intentional, and C, they're listening to the wrong people because they're not, right? They didn't leave the old environment, the old job. And like you said, who are you listening to? Speak on that, Jim, because that's what you just said is it's people need to hear that nowadays, because so many people are living below average. They're unhappy. They're not being fulfilled. And you took the chance. And now, because you took the chance, now you're eating that hot fudge sundae at the end of the day when you want, just having a great time.
Absolutely. Intentionality it's the primary factor in success. I can always tell who's going to succeed by who has decided to succeed. It doesn't matter if, like my friend Alvin Law up in Canada, you were born with no arms. And by the way, Alvin Law was the keynote speaker of the insurance industry's $1 million roundtable annual meeting, 5,000 people in the audience last week. He was born with no arms in Canada and given up by his parents and raised by foster parents with no arms. The guy can't even scratch. I have had dinner with him and his wife in London at a conference over there, and he was eating with his feet. And it was just as normal as eating with our hands is for you and me, because he didn't let his handicap become a limitation to his life. My friend W. Mitchell, it lives in Santa Barbara, California, and has a home in Molokai in Hawaii. When he was a young man, he was on a motorcycle and he was hit by a truck, and it spilled gasoline all over him. His body was burned, and it scarred him for life and burned his hands off to where they're just like this. And yet, after they grafted his skin and rebuilt him into a functioning person, he learned to live his life effectively again, and he got a good size insurance settlement. And so he invested that in, of all things, a business selling wood burning stoves. Yikes. Became successful at it, became a private pilot, was flying his own plane with his hands burned off. You know, he had adapted tools, and he was flying his own plane and crashed on takeoff and broke his spine and ended up in a wheelchair. So what did he do? He went to work in radio as a commentator and announcer, became popular as a radio host, was elected mayor of Crested Butte, Colorado, and then later in life, around age 50 or so, decided to become a full-time professional speaker, traveling alone in a wheelchair, unable to walk, with no hands. And he's been doing that for more than 25 years and earned millions of dollars. Wow. Tell me what your excuses are. Oh, my husband or wife doesn't support me. Oh, you know, my teachers told me I'm a loser. Oh, I'm overweight. Oh, I'm out of shape. Oh, I'm too skinny. Oh, I'm blind. Oh, I'm short, or I'm tall, or I'm weird, or I'm ugly, or I don't speak English very well, or I don't speak Spanish very well. What's your excuse? Excuse me. No arms. You know, I've got friends who are blind who are speakers. I've got friends in wheelchairs who are speakers. I got friends who have speech impediments and are paid professional speakers. Oh my gosh. You know, you're capable of making a difference. And now I'm not suggesting that you become a professional speaker. I'm saying I know people that have chosen this bizarre path for their career who had every reason on earth not to believe they could do it. And yet they found a way and did it and are still doing it well. I didn't believe in me growing up. Nobody ever told me I was, capable until I met Harold Gash in my late 20s, early 30s. And I had no indicators in my past to prove there was big potential in my future. But here I am, 76 years old. I just published my 25th book. I've delivered 3,500 speeches around the world for fees that total up to millions upon millions of dollars. I've had, I don't know, millions, certainly hundreds of thousands of people in my audiences, 23 major cities in China, 10 times to Australia, Poland, Europe, South America. Holy smokes. How could a guy from Little Rock, whose dad was a telephone repairman, who had a, what was it, 1.175 grade point average on a 4-point system?
Yeah.
How could he ever expect to do that well?
So, ladies and gentlemen, listen to what Jim's saying. All the excuses we make, and look at how many amazing speakers are out there, regardless if they've been in a bad accident, regardless of what's happened in their life. One was born without arms. What's your excuse? That's what I love about speaking, right? You see the sign behind me, sticker shock. The world needs to hear your story.
Yeah.
Why do you think, because you're a professional speaker, why do you think, or what's your understanding of why so many people undervalue the power of their story and they don't feel that the world needs to hear it? Because I truly believe that everybody's story needs to be heard some form, some way.
Well, it's not just your story. It's what your story does for other people. See, my story prior to getting into the field of speaking was not a story particularly interesting, but if I could tell what struggles I was going through and what ways I had found to address those struggles, and that would give hope to somebody else, then my story was worth listening to. But if I didn't know how to tell my story well, then I had an obstacle that I needed to climb, and that was learning to become a better storyteller, to be more articulate, to be more interested in other people and helping them than in shining and showing off how cool I was, because I wasn't that particularly cool. And by the way, when I started speaking, I was speaking at JC's meetings in Kiwanis and Lyons and doing free speeches in hopes of getting some business. And I was not good. Sometimes I was all puffed up and full of myself, acting like I was a bigger deal than I was, and I was lying. And I found myself in a couple of humiliating moments where I said, shame on me, I'm never going to do that again. I'm telling the truth from here on out. But I just want people to realize that what other people have been telling you that limits you has been a symptom of their limited worldview and their fears, not a symptom of your potential.
Ooh.
See, everybody's indoctrinated. Everybody on earth is indoctrinated because you've only been exposed to what you've seen and heard. You say, no, but I study great people, and yeah, but that's all you've seen and heard. And there is so much more that could be known, that what you've seen and heard is like this big in all the world of what's knowable, right? So what makes you think you're right? Whoa, well, so-and-so who I admire said I'm right. Okay, so you're putting your faith in another individual. Well, no, I put my faith in my research. Yeah, but only your research. Well, I put my faith in my gut feelings, my intuition. It's strong. Yeah. I put my faith in, no, put your faith in the Lord, right? Put your faith where it's worthy of placing it. And then do your homework and stay humble, for heaven's sakes. But be of service, be of value to the world. Make a difference in whatever ways you can. And don't listen to the naysayers and the discouragers and all the people that, for whatever reason, are telling you, nah, I don't think I'd get my hopes up. Why not? That's what
Yes.
gets people to commit. Get your hopes up.
You're right.
Be disappointed. Hey, I've had cancer. I had prostate cancer, had to have a radical prostatectomy just about 5 or 6 years ago. I was running on a mountain trail in California at age 62 and fainted. Turned out I needed a pacemaker. 10 months later, I finally caved in and said, okay, I'll get a pacemaker. And I found out that I could go back to running mountain trails again with a pacemaker. And here I am many, many years later, still going strong.
I love that.
So,
Man.
what your limits are, I'll show you people that have gotten around those a lot, and that you are in a better position than them in many cases.
I love what you're saying, because most limitations are self-imposed. I wanna circle back to what you're saying, because I truly believe if you're one of those that's thinking about entering and you're an aspiring speaker, listen to what Jim said. He humbled himself because he was humbled in a situation in his younger days as a speaker. And one big mistake that I see a lot of young speakers coming up that we teach at Sticker Shock, Jim, is that the audience is a star of the show. So many speakers think it's about them, and it's not. It's about your audience, right? You think you're this big king on top of the stage. No, like, come down and engage with your audience. They are the star of the show. And so many young speakers get it wrong and they fail. And I believe they fail for two reasons. A, that first one we just said, is that they think they're the star of the show. And second, they never flip the switch to make it, right? They don't have that mindset shift to where you're not just a speaker, you're going to build a speaking business, because it's a whole different philosophy, a whole different approach. What's your perspective on both of those?
Well, first off, the only reason for a speaker is to benefit the audience, period. So maybe you're brought in as the big deal, maybe like when I was in China, 19 separate trips between 2015 and 2019 to 23 major cities, speaking to thousands of people at big rallies for 6 hours at a time through an interpreter, which was awkward at first. And they treated me like a god. I mean, it was like Rocky Balboa. And the crowd went insane. I mean, music playing, lights sweeping the room like this, spotlights, and an entourage of like 8 or 12 people protecting me from the crowd. I'm telling the truth. I can show you a video clip. It's astounding the way I was treated. But I'm the only one of this lineup of big celebrity speakers they had been bringing in who didn't take himself so seriously and focus truly on the audience. And they didn't understand how to relate to that at first, because I'm not up there, doing this. I'm up there leaning forward, listening to them, talking with them, sharing personal stories of weakness and then later triumph, and giving them hope. And what they're used to hearing is the 10 keys to marketing and the 15 management tools that will make you great, and the 18 power tips for public speaking and stuff like that. Well, I shared ideas like those, but the way I did it was I said, look, folks, you live in a communist society. You must respect your country. You must respect your government and your country. And you must respect your ancestry and the legacy that's been handed to you by all of those that came before you. You must respect your employer, because without him or her, you wouldn't have the opportunity in the marketplace. But you also must respect your gift. You've been blessed with the ability to make the world a better place in small and maybe large ways. And when you don't use your gift, all of the rest of us are cheated out of the contributions you could have made. Well, one day I was speaking in Kunming, China, and Kitty, my translator, was with me all morning, and I'd spoken for 3 hours. And we had a security detail of maybe a dozen people. And one of the guys in that detail looked like he was carved from stone. And I mean, nobody was going to mess with this guy. I called him The Rock. And so we finished the morning program, got on the elevator, went up to my room, and Kitty and I and the others are sitting around having lunch. And Kitty says, see the guy over there? I said, The Rock? She laughed and she said, yeah. She said, he was talking to me on the way up in the elevator. I said, yeah, but you guys were speaking Mandarin, so I didn't know what you were saying. She said, he told me he's never heard ideas like this in his entire life, and it moved him very deeply. I
Mhm.
said, really? So I got up a few minutes later when nobody was looking, and I went over to the rock, and I said, excuse me. And he turned to me, and I said, thank you. And I was looking directly into his eyes from a foot away, and he's looking at me, and he starts to melt, and he starts to cry. And I pulled him in and held him, and he started to sob like a little child, like that. And I held him
Yes.
until it stopped. And then I moved him back to arm's length, and I saluted, and he saluted me. And then we went our separate ways. Well, nobody saw. It was a private moment between the two of us. And I was only doing that to honor him for sharing that with Kitty. So later at the end of the day, we're going back to the room, and Kitty said, what did you do to the rock? I said, I promise I didn't break him. She said, no, seriously, what did you say to him? I said, I just said, thank you. She said, Jim, he told me he would die for you.
Wow.
I said, oh my gosh, what a responsibility. She said, you mean an honor? I said, no, I mean a responsibility. If I'm able to touch people's lives that deeply and profoundly, I have a duty to do it honorably, to do it thoughtfully, to do it with intention of serving, not with the intention of making a big deal out of me. Wow, I'm going to take everything I say more seriously, even now, because I already thought I was empathetic with my audience, but I didn't realize that some of them were making life-changing decisions based on what I had shared.
I love that. That's just so powerful because it really is a gift. When you're saying that, think about how you altered the trajectory of this gentleman's life. You shifted his heart, his mind.
And he shifted his life.
Yes.
See, that's the thing. The people say to me, you changed my life. No, I didn't. I shared ideas. If your life changed, it's because you changed it.
Yes. I love that. I think it reminds me of when I spoke one time. This probably back about 5 years ago when I first started. I used to speak at high schools and junior highs, and I went and I spoke, and I never had spoken about suicide before. Never shared my story. Not even my son, who was 18 or 19 at the time. They knew I have this scar from my abdominal from the top to the bottom, and I've never talked about it. My son's never asked me. I just said just a scar I have, right? I would always cut it off. That day I was on stage and I just had this movement in my heart. The Holy Spirit tugged at me, and I was looking at, because I was in the auditorium and they had all these words around the auditorium, and I was like, one of them just spoke to me, and I said, I'm going to shift it up a little bit. Sat down on the step of the auditorium. Said, I've never shared this story with anyone, and I spoke about the day when I shot myself. So maybe you're here right now. You're thinking about taking your life. Maybe you think you don't matter. I go, well, this is Daniel Gomez Inspire saying you matter. After I spoke that day, the counselor came up to me and just said, thank you so much, Daniel. We could feel your heart. There was like 2 or 3 students crying. One little girl came up the stairs and wanted it. Like she was just sobering, like sobbing. She says, you saved my life today. I was thinking about killing myself. And of course I couldn't give her a hug because, right. And the counselor was there. My wife was happened to be with me that day. I said, can my wife just embrace her? She goes, yeah, that's fine. But you just never know what the power of speaking can do for someone that is on the edge of taking their own life or giving up.
Yeah. Let me share one more story.
Powerful.
I was in Penang, Malaysia, 2019, December. And I was leading I do a thing called the Going Pro Experts Academy. And this was for a group of people in China. I do it here in the US, and it's mostly done through Zoom calls and some mastermind events. But I was over there for the culminating event, the summit. And so I had about 30 people with me. And I had been doing training, and then we would go on excursions. And we went to this little fishing village called Georgetown near Penang, Malaysia. and it's a tourist trap and a real fishing village. So there's all the boats there, and then there's all the restaurants where they bring the live catch and you can have it right on the spot. But there's also little shops that sell T-shirts and trinkets and hats, and they've got a python you can put around your neck and pose for pictures for a tip.
Yes.
Well, we're walking along, and my group is following me, and Kitty, of course, is by my side always because I don't speak Mandarin. And so as we walk along, I'm making comments and she's translating their comments and mine. And we see this guy sitting on the ground in the dirt. It's a paved area with gray slate kind of pavers, but there's one patch of it that's just gravel, and there's a post there, and there's this guy in his, I don't know, I guess his 20s, who's pretty scarred up. He's got a big scar on the side of his face, and he's got a little bit of a beard, and he's very dirty, and he has on a T-shirt with holes in it and sweatpants with holes in them, and he's sitting cross-legged, and it's obvious through the holes in one leg of his pants he's missing a leg. He's got an artificial leg, and he's playing guitar. He's got an old beat up guitar and a bunch of handwritten notes in front of him, and they're all in a stack, and that's his sheet music, so to speak. And as we walk by, I put some money in his hat, and he's singing English. So I turned back around and I said, "Excuse me." And my group, they all went, "Teacher is talking to the unclean man." For them, this was not done. This was a lower form of life, not to be acknowledged by we enlightened great ones, right?
Wow.
And I mean, it wasn't that bad, but that's kind of the attitude.
Yes.
And so they were kind of taken back that I would bother to personally address a person in this position. And I said, "Excuse me, you speak English?" And he said, yes, a little. And I said, "Do you know any American music?" He said, "I know Hotel California." And I said, "Well, I play guitar and sing back home. And could I sing that song with you?" And he said, "Well, yeah." I mean, nobody had ever asked him. So
Yes, I love it.
I sat down by him in the dirt with my leg against his artificial leg. And he said, "Do you want to play it?" And I said, "Sure." So he hands me his guitar, and I start going.
Love it.
On a dark desert highway, and I went through and sang the song with him, and I'm singing, "Such a lovely place," and he goes, "Such a lovely place, such a lovely face," and we're singing Hotel California, having a blast, and he's beating percussion on his hollow leg, and it's just as natural as if he were dining at my family table. And we finish our song, and the other people don't know how to react because they don't understand how someone who's not poor could be sitting there with this beggar in such a situation. So we finish our song, and a number of other people contributed tips, and I gave him a hug. That was
Yeah.
like that. And so I've got my arm around him. We're doing selfies, and I thanked him for that. And then I left. And so we're walking away. And I said to Kitty, while the others are following, I said, "Why did I do that?" She said, "You love to play guitar." I said, No. I said, "Gather the group." So I turned around, and our group kind of formed a semicircle, and I'm talking through Kitty to them. I said, "Every day this guy whose name is Halif, by the way, I met him, I
Yes.
asked his name. Halif sits there every day in the dirt, looking up at people. Everyone looks down at him two ways. Physically, they look down at him, and attitudinally, they look down at him as a lower person, not worthy of their attention. And he sits there and he plays, hoping to entertain somebody enough that he'll get enough money that day to be able to survive again until tomorrow.
Wow.
So he's living from hour to hour, day to day, trying to do something that's pleasing to other people in hopes that he can get through the day. I said, now,
That's powerful.
yeah, it is. But I said, so I came up and I thought, I want him to feel like he's absolutely equal to other people. So I asked his name. I sat in the dirt with him, against him, physically touching.
Yes.
Played his guitar, and we sang together. And then I wrapped my arm around him, thanked him, and we took pictures together. Now, how long do you think he will remember that experience? And Kitty said, for the rest of his life. I said, so will I. And then I said, every one of you, every day, has the ability to do something like that. It costs nothing, takes no education, no physical skill. You don't have to be special. You don't have to be pretty. You don't have to be smart. All you've got to do is care and take a moment to share your space on this earth with somebody else in a way that acknowledges their dignity. And they all just stood there kind of speechless.
Man, that's life-changing. As we're coming to the end of the show, I want to thank you for sharing these powerful stories, because it's moving, and you got to experience all this because you're a speaker. There's a question I want to ask. There's two questions I want to ask you as we're coming to the end of the show, because I've had this debate with someone before, and I've learned that the Bible says in Proverbs, don't be a fool, right? Don't argue with the fool, because they'll make you look like a fool. So I just said,
never wrestle with a pig, because both
of
you get dirty.
And who better to ask this question than a qualified gentleman like Jeff Cathcart, the president. Now listen to this, because he's qualified. He's a former president of the National Speakers Association. And the conversation that was this, a debate was, I said, why are you calling yourself a professional speaker if you haven't been paid yet 100 gigs? He goes, well, I've been paid 10, 15 times. I said, yeah, but that doesn't qualify as a professional speaker. And where I got my information from, which is studying, the NSA and everything else, it says the guidelines are you have to get 100 paid engagements before you consider yourself a full-blown professional speaker. So who better to ask than the former president of the NSA, Jim Cathcart? What is the bottom line on that, Jim?
First off, let's look at the word professional. It means to profess. It means you stand for something. It means that to you, the 5 qualifiers of a profession apply. What you do is done according to a set of ethical standards. You do it right. It's done for pay. It's done as a service to other people. It's done, let's see, just a second. It's done, you're educated, highly educated for what you're doing. In other words, you know your stuff, your subject. Doesn't mean you've been through, high degrees and formal education. It means you really, really studied what you're talking about. And it means that you consider your education to never end, so that you're never saying, okay, I've arrived, I got my PhD, been there, done that. No. So it's well educated in your craft, lifelong education, done as a service to other people, done for pay, and done according to a set of ethical standards, to profess to be a professional. And you can be professional at being a garbage man. You can be a professional educator. You can be a professional lawn care person. It's not the business you're in, it's the way you're in business that determines whether you're a pro. I decided to become a professional speaker long before I was one. I remember getting $10 one time for a 120-mile round trip. 120 miles I drove, they gave me $10 for gas. Of course, back then that would cover a lot more of the gas, but still, that's not really a paid gig. But in my mind, it was the beginning of my speaking career.
Yeah.
And first time I got $100, I thought I'd hit the moon. I
So,
did.
so is it 100 paid gigs? Is that what it is written?
No, I think 100 paid gigs. If you want to make a career of it, yes, go for at least 100 paid gigs.
So if
before
someone
you
doesn't
feel
if
like
someone
you
doesn't
really,
have 100 if someone doesn't have 100 gigs, then I guess the debate that we're talking about, because in the I don't know who I was
where do you
speaking to.
find the 100?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, here's where you find the 100. Anywhere people are gathered and willing to listen to you, if you have some value to share. See,
Yes.
that's the thing. You say, well, I'm a good speaker. I should be paid to speak. Really? Do you have a message that's worth paying to hear? Do you have a style that is so good that people will be happy that they gave you money to watch you do your thing? Okay, then you're ready. But if not, then you're still learning. Okay. So where do you find speaking engagement? What I did was I started speaking at social clubs, at JC's and Kiwanis and Lions and Civitan and Rotary and things like that. And I started doing appearances in classrooms and doing, I taught a night course at a junior college on time management. And I was teaching other people's material, but I was in front of a class teaching. And you know what I was paid? $15 a night. $15 a night, Daniel. So
That's a far day. Now you're making 10, 20,000.
I have made my highest fee so far was $40,000 for a 1-hour speech.
Yeah, people don't believe
That's pretty substantial.
Yeah.
That's not my normal fee, but that's been my pinnacle so far on single actual fee, not product sales, fee. And I started out by getting $10 for gas, and I spent more than that on gas.
Ladies and gentlemen, listen to what the great Jim is saying. Started off $10 his first speech. You can make more in 1 hour than what most people make within a month. That dream can be yours, and it's just amazing. Get his book right here. What to do when you're the speaker.
Yep.
Go to Amazon right now. Get a copy of his book. Jim would appreciate it. You're going to learn a lot of wisdom. And Jim, last question, because we're going to end the show here. What is a quote or a scripture that you rely on in times of adversity? A quote or a scripture that you rely on?
First off, John 10:10 is my personal life purpose. I've come that people would have life and have it more abundantly. That's what I take as my mission. I mean, I don't think of myself, like Jesus, for heaven's sakes. I think of myself. That was an interesting comment, for heaven's sakes. But I think of myself as being a person who can help other people live more abundantly by both teaching it and living it. So I try to live abundantly in all the ways that I can. I try to treat other people with dignity and to uplift them in any way that I can. And here's a personal question I want our listeners to really take home. Ask yourself every day, how would the person I'd like to be do the things I'm about to do? Upgrade every single act you take, every single word you speak. How would the person I'd like to be do this? And everything gets better as you do it. By the way, in the notes, I put free.cathcart.com. You can get a free copy of this book, digital copy, if you go to that and download it. But please go to the bookstore and get a real one.
Yes. And we'll get all your information in the show notes. And thank you so much, Jim, for being here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, go to Amazon, get a copy of his book. What to do when you're the speaker. What to do when you're the speaker. Love it. Thank you so much for being here with us, Jim. You've been an amazing guest. And ladies and gentlemen, don't worry, we're gonna have all his information here, and just connect with them. Jim's a beautiful soul. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the wrap for this week's episode of the Daniel Gomez Inspire Show. What a powerful, powerful episode. Loved it myself. Thank you for joining us again, Jim. And if you're stuck in life and business, ladies and gentlemen, go to the makings of a millionairemind.com. That's the makings of a millionairemind.com. Get your autographed copy of our book. The Makings of a Millionaire Mind, and it's available on Audible now. So go to Audible too. You have that. I'll tell you what, the reviews have been amazing. Customers are loving it, and it's life changing. And September 8th and 9th here in San Antonio, you see the sign behind me. We want to see you at our Sticker Shock Speaking Academy, where you can become a professional paid speaker. People laughed at me before I became one, and now I've shared the stage with amazing people like Les Brown, John Maxwell. I want to help you get your speaking career going. Until next week, we'll see you here at Daniel Gomez Inspire Show, and we look forward to seeing you next week here with another amazing guest. And once again, Jim, thank you for joining us, my brother. God bless you, everybody. This is Daniel Gomez Inspires, and thank you for listening to our show today. Please share this episode with a friend, leave us a review, and subscribe to our show. And for listening to our show today, I want to give you a free gift. I want to invite you to our Millionaire Mind community. Text the word millionaire, that's millionaire, to 210-942-5059. Yes, join our community today and receive millionaire affirmations, inspirational quotes on a weekly basis. That's 210-942-5059. Text the word millionaire today and join our community. And once again, thank you for listening to our show.